Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. This is the last video I am filming in 2024, so you know what that means. We are going to be talking through every single book I read this year. I'm gonna have to structure this a little bit differently than I usually do in my monthly wrap-ups, or else this video will be 3 hours long. So I'm just going to headline that this isn't the video for in-depth descriptions of each of these books because we're going to cover 106 of them. If you want in-depth details and thoughts, I have done a monthly wrap-up for every single month this year. If you want to check those out, I will make sure to link that playlist down below. If you haven't already, I would make sure to grab a drink or grab a snack because we might be here for a while. So let's go ahead and hop on in. Similarly to how I like to start my monthly wrap-ups, let's talk about some stats and use some graphics here. Per Goodreads, I read 106 books, which equaled 40,228 pages. My average book length for the year was 378 pages. The book I read that was shelved by the most amount of people was Harry Potter, with over 13 million people who have read that. And then the least shelved book that I read was Leading Gracefully, which only 437 people have read. According to Goodreads, my average rating was a 3.5. Since Goodreads does not allow half-star ratings, that's a little off, but it is pretty close. But if we look at the graphic that Fable provided me, we can get my exact average. Why my total number of books looks a little bit differently on Goodreads versus Fable is Fable does not count DNFs as read books. So with taking out DNFs, Fable says that I've read 100 books and my average rating is a 3.6 stars. I started the year by clearing a lot of books from my Kindle that were either partially read or half read. First one of those being Love in the City by Jen Morris. I'll be honest, with this book only being a 2 stars, there's not a lot that stands out. Our female main character moves from Australia to New York, and we kind of just follow her through her first few months in the city. I think her love interest was like her neighbor in her apartment building, but I can't tell you any of the details of that romance. Really wasn't a standout for me. Don't know if I'd ever read anything more by this author. Next, we have The Wedding Crasher, again at a 2 stars. Main thing I remember is that it felt like this was trying to be like a sexy Suits because the male main character was a lawyer and he starts fake dating this girl to try and be more partner material with the firm. I think there was like 2 chapters in here that were actually enjoyable, but I just remember that the male main character literally did nothing for me. Next, we have Love on the Brain by Miss Ali Hazelwood. Ali and I, we kind of have a love-hate relationship. While her books are easy to get through, generally I find her female main character somewhat insufferable, and that was very much the case in this one. B brings so much miscommunication into this plot line, and the male main character felt like a clone copy of the other male main character in The Love Hypothesis. So this book just really wasn't a standout for me at 3 stars. This next book is a book I wish I could forget. Court of the Vampire Queen was my first introduction to the reverse harem genre, and at 1 star, I really don't think that that is my trope that I like to read about. I just felt like there was absolutely no plot to go along with all the sex that happens in this book. There was so much of this that I just skimmed, and I wish I could go back to my previous self and tell her that it is okay to DNF a book. To so drastically contrast that previous one, we had Becoming by Michelle Obama, 5 stars, my favorite nonfiction book of the year. I've had this book for a really long time, and previously it intimidated me because it is pretty long, but I utilized the audiobook for a good portion of this and I couldn't recommend it anymore. It's narrated by Michelle Obama herself. It helps you feel so connected to her. She is so eloquent and well-spoken. Loved hearing about how successful of a woman she is in her own right, and I would encourage everyone to read this book. Unfortunately, this next one I've already unhauled because I hated it so much. It was Untamed by Glennon Doyle. After reading how well-paced Michelle's book was and jumping into this one, I found the structure so jarring because some chapters would literally only be 1 page. It was so chaotic and sporadic in how she would present information, and as a reader, I couldn't get any takeaways because we were moving from topic to topic so quickly. The next 3 books are all within the All Souls trilogy, which starts with A Discovery of Witches. I read the first 2 books in the series last year, gave A Discovery of Witches 5 stars, absolutely loved the book and the TV show that goes along with it. The main storyline we follow is a witch and a vampire who come together within this world that is very much frowned upon because species aren't supposed to intermingle, and there's just a lot of problems that happen following their relationship. Book 3, The Book of Life, I feel like is where the series could have stopped. I don't know why we continued on into book 4, Times Convert. We follow a completely different story and a new side character within Times Convert. It was so drawn out, so long, so unnecessary. Only gave that a 2.5 stars because I really just don't know what the purpose of that book was. And then finally, The Blackbird Oracle. I liked seeing a new addition to Diana's powers being introduced, but again, it just felt unnecessary. I was hopeful that this was going to be the finale of the series, but no, it ends on a cliffhanger. And again, I just don't know why. I really think these later books are only for the super fans of the series. I was brutal with the books that I read at the start of this year because the next 3, again, I have already unhauled. And that is the Summer I Turned Pretty series. I read each of these books in a day, definitely geared towards YA. They read like they were written for young teenagers, but I was intrigued because I do enjoy the show. I think the first book, The Summer I Turned Pretty, is the strongest in the series because it just has great nostalgic vibes. It really places you in the mindset of summers in your childhood. So 3 stars. The second book, I gave 3 stars as well. I feel like because something difficult takes place, there's more emotional depth that we see in this book than we see in the others. But the final book, Will Always Have Summer, is a 2 stars and I would not recommend it. This truly ruins the series for me. It was just a character assassination on one of our love interests and completely unnecessary. Abby Jimenez has a couple different interconnected standalone series. I did not read book 1 in this series. I jumped right to book 2, which is the Happy Ever After playlist. This is a One of Us is Famous romance. The male main character is a very successful pop star. I gave this a 4 stars, but now I'm kind of doubting that. Maybe this is more of a 3.5 because there's not much that sticks out in my head whenever I think back to this plot or these characters. But I do remember enjoying my time while reading this one. The next book in that series, Life's Too Short, I very much did not enjoy. I listened to most of this as an audiobook and I just remember driving in my car and wanting to rage at what was going on within these characters. I've ranted about this book in multiple videos because I'm so disappointed with how it was handled. There's discussions around a hereditary chronic illness that runs in our FMC's family. How the author decided to handle that at the end of the book, I felt like was such a cop-out and something that I could absolutely not support. Let's go ahead and get another bad book out of the way. Girl Wash Your Face by Rachel Hollis. DNF. This is going to be brutal, but I just really didn't get the impression that this woman should be providing advice to anyone. Whenever she started talking about marriage and providing advice on that, I just had to put the book down because I knew I wasn't gaining anything by reading this book. Here's one that I think has only gotten better with time, and the more I think about this. The Hotel Nantucket by Ellen Hildebrandt, I absolutely love. I loved the third person experience that we got throughout this story. All of these characters' plot lines were so juicy and full of drama. If you like The Real Housewives, you will certainly love this book because it is just chaotic, but I really did like the ending that a lot of our characters found, and I felt like it was a really great way to wrap up the story. The Gifts of Imperfection by Brene Brown, another fantastic nonfiction read. This one is so short, so this is so easy to get through if you want to add this to your list. If you're someone that struggles with perfectionism, I'd highly encourage you to read this because there's just some really great takeaways that you can grab from this book and easily implement into your life. Next, we have a cute little small town romance series by Sarah Adams. In When in Rome, we follow our FMC, who is a pop star trying to get out of the spotlight. So she goes to the small town of Rome, Kentucky, and meets the town baker. Very sweet, very wholesome, grumpy sunshine trope. This could definitely be a Hallmark movie, and I gave this a 3.5 stars. The next book in this series is Practice Makes Perfect. We follow the MMC's little sister, Annie, and the pop star's bodyguard, Will. This book was still definitely cute. However, I wasn't connecting with our FMC as much. This is the trope where he's more experienced and he's kind of like teaching her about dating. And the fact that this woman was like a 30-year-old but acting like she was 13 kind of didn't do it for me. So I gave this one a 3 stars. Very exciting news, we made it through our first stack of books. There's only 5 more to go. I'm gonna keep this one short and sweet because I've talked so much about these books this year. I read the entire ACOTAR series. If you can't tell by my previous books, this was actually like my introduction to fantasy. I think this is a great introductory place to start. Our first book, ACOTAR, I gave a 4 stars. We follow a mortal girl who makes a mistake and gets taken into the fairy lands, and it turns into kind of a Beauty and the Beast retelling from there. However, where the story goes by the second half of the book is a totally different direction. I gave this a 4 stars because I felt like the first first half of the story was really slow, but then the second half just absolutely took off. Going into A Court of Mist and Fury, this is a 5-star read. This book is absolutely incredible. The relationship that we get in this book is absolutely top tier. Couldn't love it anymore. And then we go into A Court of Wings and Ruin. This one we still get to enjoy the romance a little bit, however it is very politics heavy. Again, a 5 stars. I think this is actually my favorite in the series, but these two are a very close tie. The little novella that comes forth is A Court of Frost and Starlight. This is just following the gang during winter solstice, and it is very mundane. Nothing crazy happens in this book. However, it's kind of preparing us and introducing us to other characters' points of view, because we mainly only get Feyre's perspective in these first 3 books, but we get a bunch of different POVs in this one. And then A Court of Silver Flames follows Feyre's sister Nesta. Nesta is a very difficult character to like sometimes. However, I feel like she gets such an amazing redemption arc in the story. Easy 5 stars on this book as well. I feel like everyone has had to have heard of this book by this point, The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. Ashley Poston does such a great job of incorporating magical realism into her love stories. Within this story, we follow a magical apartment which can slip 7 years in the past or 7 years in the future. When it is slipped 7 years in the past, our FMC meets her love interest, but how do you build a relationship with someone 7 years in the past? Very sweet, very cozy, absolutely love the vibes, 4.5 stars. This next one has got to be one of the best audiobooks that I listened to all year. Tom Lake by Ann Patchett, narrated by Meryl Streep. We follow the story of a retired Hollywood actress retelling the tales of her youth to her 3 daughters. I absolutely love this one. It's maybe a little bit slow, but it felt so real, especially whenever it was being narrated by Meryl Streep. I definitely think it's worth the listen. I know there are some diehard Elsie Silver fans out there. This is the one and only book I've read by Elsie Silver thus far. Flawless, which is the start of the Chestnut Spring series. We follow a forced proximity between a bull rider and his publicist as they're trying to rebuild his reputation. I did enjoy this, but I don't know, something about it I couldn't fully connect to. And I tried to read the next book in this series, but the first chapter was literally just our male main character staring at this girl's ass in the line of a coffee shop. And I'm just kind of worried about continuing the series. I know everyone loves it, but something about it hasn't pulled me in thus far. This next one is certainly a book I will be unhauling after this video. Love in Other Words by Christina Lauren. This is a book that I've heard so much hype about that really didn't live up to expectations. Following childhood, friends to lovers, second chance romance, where I did really enjoy our past timeline watching these 2 fall in love as teenagers. However, I really didn't enjoy everything that happened in present day. And it felt like anytime we needed a conflict to happen in the story, we just trauma dumped on one of our characters. Just felt like it was lazy writing and didn't resonate with me at all. Talking about the other interconnected standalone series by Abby Jimenez, the start of it is Part of Your World, where we follow a big city girl meets small town guy, age gap romance where the female is older. Not a trope that we see very often in books. Did enjoy that it was a little bit different. I feel like this book did a good job of showing romance, but also some emotional depth, because we see quite a few different versions of abuse take place outside of simply physical abuse. So I felt like it was a book that opened up a lot of interesting discussions, and I did enjoy it, so I did give this a 3.5 stars. Continuing on in that series, book 2, Yours Truly. Another book where expectations and reality really did not meet. There's a lot of praise for how our male main character's anxiety is represented on page. As someone with anxiety, I appreciated what was being discussed and was highlighting quite a few sections in the first half of this book. However, by the second half, I felt like he was strangely one-dimensional and his anxiety was his only personality trait, which I didn't enjoy. Also in the first half, I felt like our female main character really did support him well with his anxiety, but how she acted in the second half really lost me. I felt like what she was doing was so triggering and out of character. By the end, I was extremely frustrated and gave this a 2 stars. I had so much hope with this one, but this was another disappointment. I was hoping that this book was going to be like a Ocean's 11 heist, but with magical elements. And unfortunately, that is not what I got with this one. Our FMC is forced into a situation to steal a painting from this like impenetrable fortress, essentially. She builds a crew to get this done, and each of them has like very specific magical abilities. But magic is just so not talked about in the first half of this book. And then it's the only way that the heist is accomplished. It felt like our author put herself in too much of a hole with this one and didn't know how to write herself out of it. Therefore, magic was added to the plot line times 1,000, and it just really didn't make sense with what happened previously in the book. Absolutely love the cover on this one. Notes on your sudden disappearance. But I'll be honest, this one was a strange one. There's definitely feelings of unease that come up after you read this book. Our main character is just kind of odd. She loses her sister whenever she's like 13. And how we see that impact the rest of her life, and how she has a very interesting relationship with her emotions and how she views the outside world. I just felt kind of icky at some points with things that she would say. But I will say the story is very different. Definitely not something I've ever read before, so I would give this author another chance. I will just say that this book has a very melancholy feeling, and I think it's best to know that whenever going into this, because I don't think this cover represents melancholy. I thought this book was going to be much happier than it actually was. Daughter of the Moon Goddess by Su Lin Tan. This is the one and only book I've ever read that follows Chinese mythology. We follow the daughter of the Moon Goddess, who doesn't realize that her mom has actually been exiled to the moon. Something happens where she has to escape the moon, and then she gets thrown into this competition, warrior training background that takes place, and the story just really unfolds from there. I liked the plot of this story, however the writing was just a little bit too flowery for me. I felt like every scene, every dress, every food, every jewel was just so drastically over explained that this book took a really long time to read and get through. This is the start of a series. I don't think I'm going to continue it. I don't really know if I would read anything else by this author, but if Chinese mythology is something that interests you, maybe you could pick this one up. Next is the Vancouver Storm Hockey Romance series. First book, Behind the Net, I gave a 3 stars. This was another Grumpy Sunshine trope, which I hope I don't read very many Grumpy Sunshine tropes next year. I feel like it is a trope that is just so wholeheartedly overdone. Really didn't vibe with our male main character. Our FMC was a singer, which I think just like singers in books give me the ick. And the pet name he gave her to go along with that was really cringe to me as well. After that, I really didn't have high hopes when going into book 2, The Fake Out. However, gave this book a 5 stars. This is one of my favorites of the year. Our MMC Rory was automatically added to the book boyfriend roster list. This is a reverse Grumpy Sunshine, where he is very much a golden retriever and she is very much that black cat energy. This was the book that made me realize that reverse Grumpy Sunshine is actually probably one of my favorite tropes. Didn't know what to expect when reading book 3 in this series. The Wingman came out later this fall. This is a friends to lovers story where our FMC gets out of a long-term relationship, moves in with our MMC, and enlists him to be her dating coach. I don't even think she actually goes on a date with anyone else, so that plot line is very loose. It was fine at a 3.25. I found our FMC a little bit annoying because she caused a lot of miscommunication. Another audiobook I listened to was Finding Me by Viola Davis. Fantastic audiobook. Like Michelle Obama, she is so eloquent and well-spoken. The reason I rated this a little bit lower is her story is just so heartbreaking. I did find it hard to get through at times. I would just recommend that if you are interested in this one, I potentially would check the trigger warnings because she has been through a lot in her life. After loving The Hotel Nantucket, I wanted to give another Elin Hilderbrand book a try. I read Barefoot, which follows 3 different women who go on a summer vacation. Each of them are kind of running away from a different aspect of their lives. And again, we just get a lot of drama that unfolds. I will say, I didn't love this book as much because these women were just so wholeheartedly in the middle of a midlife crisis, and I didn't love how the story was wrapped up as much, but it is that same writing style that we saw within The Hotel Nantucket. I can't believe it. I think this is my first Emily Henry book on this list. There are quite a few to come after this. Beach read, 5 stars. This is one of the few books of the year that made me cry. Both of our main characters within the story are authors who are experiencing writer's block. As they are neighbors at these beach homes, they decide to write in each other's writing style for the summer to see if that can help them generate a new story. Loved watching their relationship unfold, loved learning more about our FMC's relationship to her dad, and is a book I would highly recommend. I do sometimes feel bad about the books that I read after 5 stars because I probably do judge them a little bit more harshly. After Beach Read, I read The Lost and the Chosen. And this writing style I just found so jarring and felt so immature. I can't even really tell you what happens in this book. There's like this teenage girl who realizes she has powers, and then she gets taken to this home with like 10 dudes, and you know it's just setting up to be a reverse harem story, but we don't actually get any real spice within this book. I just hated this writing style and didn't want to continue the series from here. Love Redesigned by Lauren Asher. I think this is part of her Lakefront Billionaires series. This was like a rivals slash enemies to lovers story. Our FMC is like really going through it and moves back home, and her childhood rival Julian gets roped into helping her out of this tough season of life. So he buys her a house that they redo together because he's a contractor and she's an interior designer. And it was cute. It wasn't a standout. I haven't rushed to pick up the next book in this series because they are pretty long. I think they're like 500 plus pages for a romance, but gave it a 3.5. And if billionaire romances are your thing, I would say give it a go. This next one is a book that I mainly read for work, The Inspirational Leader by Gifford Thomas. This is a very, very short book, so I think I read this again in a day. Gave it a 3 stars because I didn't feel like there was anything new. A lot of the takeaways in this one I was already aware of and have heard before. So while it's nice to have them condensed down into a book, this is absolutely not a book that changed my life. The Ministry of Time by Kellyanne Bradley. Listen to this as an audiobook, probably one that would be better to read physically because it does involve time travel. Our FMC works for the British government in this time travel program where they rescue people from the past who are about to die and bring them back to the future and try to integrate them into modern society. Once you get to the ending, you realize that there are so many moving pieces within the story, which I really don't think I picked up on that much by listening to it. But I do feel like it's an interesting story that I haven't heard before. And the fact that this book was the author's debut is insane to me. I would definitely read what she puts out next. Here's another series that I absolutely haven't shut up about, so I'll try to keep this one brief. The Powerless series by Lauren Roberts. Powerless, obviously a 5 stars. I was obsessed with our main character in this book, Kai Azar. He is the enforcer within this realm where he needs to banish and kill all ordinaries. However, our FMC is an ordinary hiding in plain sight in a world of elites. One day she kind of accidentally ends up saving him, and that gets her nominated into these trials where it is just brutal fight to the death, and these two kind of team up throughout those trials and we see their relationship grow from there. There's a little novella that comes next called Powerful. This takes place in the same timeline as Powerless, however we're just getting another POV. We're getting our FMC's best friend. Learn more about her story and her love interest who may come into play in future books. And then we have Reckless. This book was a big letdown for a lot of people, and I will be honest, the plot doesn't move much in this story. It's a huge game of cat and mouse and we kind of just go in circles. I will say that the banter that takes place in this book is phenomenal, and a reason that I gave it 4.25 stars. If it wasn't for their relationship, I think this book would be lower, but I am excited for book 3 to come out in this series early next year and see how this author wraps up this trilogy. The Good Part by Sophie Cousins. Really don't remember much about this story. I think our main character is just like having a really tough day, and she says, I want to skip to the good part, and she wakes up one day like 17 years in the future, and then she has to make the choice of, do I want to stay here or do I want to go back in my life? And I literally don't remember anything else about this book. 3.25 stars. Oddly specific. I feel like we could probably round down to just a 3 stars on this one. Now here is a book that took me by surprise and I absolutely loved. One for My Enemy by Olive E. Blake. This is my first time reading anything by Olive E. Blake. I definitely want to read more by her. This was a Romeo and Juliet retelling, however, make it witches in present day New York. Absolutely loved it. These rivaling witch families were so ruthless. She does not hold back. So many people die in this book, and I loved it. I loved her writing style. I loved how lyrical it was. There were so many amazing quotes in here that I was highlighting left and right. Definitely would consider doing a reread on this next fall time. Here's kind of an interesting one. Feelings Buried Alive Never Die. This is kind of a hard book to even summarize. Basically, we're just learning about how unresolved feelings, unresolved traumas resonate in your body somehow. And if you find that you have a chronic condition that cannot be solved by modern medicine, maybe look into some different underlying causes that your body could be reacting to. There's this whole glossary towards the back of the book where it talks about all these different conditions and some of their underlying causes. So like, here's just one example. If you have chronic dizziness, could be lack of solid self-direction, ego wants to be the boss, not taking personal time for self, going around in circles due to being unorganized, feeling overloaded, feeling I don't want to cope anymore, not wanting to accept things as they are. Probably not something for everyone, but if you are someone who's into more of the holistic and spiritual way of thinking, it could be something worth reading. The Paradise Problem by Christina Lauren. This was me trying to give Christina Lauren another chance after Love in Other Words. This is like a very good summer read. We follow these two people who are like not together. However, they are technically married and have to fake being in a relationship in front of our MMC's family so that he can receive his inheritance. I found our FMC in this pretty annoying. The family was pretty insufferable as well. I don't really love how Christina Lauren create their conflicts. They feel very overdone in my opinion. Give it a 3.5 stars. Don't really think I'm going to be running for any of their upcoming releases. Another very summery read was Vacation Wars by Megan Quinn. And our FMC is in Greece with her sister and some close friends because her sister's about to get married. They start putting a lot of pressure on her to be dating and try to take over her love life. So she teams up with her childhood crush on the island and they like start playing pranks on the sister and the friends. I don't know. I don't remember much about this book. I don't remember really loving it either. 3 stars. I do believe it was on Kindle Unlimited, so if you're ever like desperate for a free beachy read, maybe you could pick it up next summer, but wouldn't recommend that you go out and purchase this. Read books 1 and 2 in the Bridge Kingdom series. The series does go beyond these first 2 books, however, it starts following a different couple. So I've completed this couple's story and don't really feel like continuing on from there. Our FMC has been trained since like birth with all of her sisters to be assassins. That's because there's a treaty signed between 2 countries where one of the girls and the male heir are to be married. So these girls have been trained with the knowledge that if they were to be married off to this heir, they would be a spy undercover for their home country with a plan of assassinating this king whenever the time comes. Why I gave these books a 3 stars is this was kind of marketed as if it was a romantic-y book. However, there was like no romance that took place within these stories. Both of these books were like 85–90% politics. And while I'm fine with politics taking place in romantic stories, I also do need romance. So this book just really didn't meet expectations. Already down a camera battery and we're only halfway through. I'm really gonna need to pick up the pace here. Continuing on, our next book is a novel love story. Again, this has a lot of the magical realism elements that are so fun within Ashley Poston books. Our FMC, while driving to a book club cabin trip, ends up in the town of her favorite book series. She knows all the characters, has the ability to alter their lives and alter their story, and I really love the cozy vibes. 4.5 stars. Another really quick and easy read regarding leadership. However, this one is specifically geared towards women in leadership. Kind of acknowledging that leadership tends to be a man's world, but that does not mean that women need to abandon the feminine traits that make us great. So mainly a book just focusing on how to stay in your feminine side while being a leader as well. These next 3 are all surrounding Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater. I did end up reading the prequel, which is called The Lord Sorcier. Gave this a 3 stars. It gives us a lot of backstory on our MMC that we see in Half a Soul, because he is definitely a mysterious character. So I did enjoy getting more of his backstory. However, a lot of it is surrounding a war, which wasn't my favorite storyline. 3 stars. Half a Soul, I really did enjoy, 4.25. Our FMC, Dora, loses half of her soul as a child to a fairy, and she represents a neurodivergent character because she doesn't feel feelings like a lot of others do. But it's still showing how she's worthy of a person, worthy of love, even though she's a little bit different. The really short novella that takes place after that, The Latchkey. This was my shortest book of the year at only 31 pages. I wish this was longer. I wish this was like at least 100 pages because I really did enjoy this story and following our main characters after book 1. Gave it a 3.5 stars. Really would encourage you to read the series as a whole. Hoping that I can finish this series and read books 2 and 3 in 2025. absolutely stunning book that we have here, Fable. I love this blue accent color. I love these blue sprayed edges. Didn't so much love what was inside this book. My friends and family will definitely remember me talking about this one because this is the book I ranted about it having so much boat talk. This whole story is like surrounding ships and water and pirates, and we were just too in the weeds about boat discussions in this book. It ends on a cliffhanger, and I have no inclination to finish out this duology because I have to say this was a struggle to get through just simply because I was not engaged whatsoever. After reading the Vancouver Storm series and really enjoying that by Stephanie Archer, I wanted to read the first series that she ever wrote. It follows 4 different brothers, and in book 1, called That Kind of Guy, we follow a grumpy sunshine fake dating scenario where our MMC wants to be mayor. However, to seem more respectable and help him get more votes, he fake dates the owner of this town's restaurant. And we just have a cute, spicy time from there. 3.75 stars. I felt like this book found me at the perfect time, and it was exactly what I was looking for. Book 2, following one of the other brothers, called The Wrong Mr. Right. This is another dating coach, guy is more experienced book trope that I've read a couple of this year. Again, not my absolute favorite trope. I feel like once you've read it once, you've read all that the trope can really offer. I did give it a 3.75 because, again, I think it found me at the right time where I was just wanting quick, spicy reads. However, once I got to book 3, which is In Your Dreams, Holden Rhodes, I ended up DNFing that book. It just felt like the 2 characters in book 3 were solely written to have sex with one another. I didn't feel like the plot made any sense. I didn't feel like their lead up in the relationship made any sense either. Couldn't connect to it at all, and therefore I DNF'd it. There's only 1 book left in this series, and I am undecided if I'm going to continue on with it or not. Our next one was definitely a big surprise for me because I didn't know what to expect when reading this. Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir is a very intense sci-fi novel where we follow an astronaut in space who is tasked with saving the world. Our sun is getting eaten away by this organism, and he needs to find how we can counteract that, or else the earth is going to freeze and everyone is going to die. No pressure, especially for whenever he wakes up in space, he has amnesia. Can't even remember his own name, can't remember why he's there, and we just follow him slowly piece things together while also building a relationship with someone that he meets in space. This ending 100% made me cry. This one, the best endings that I've ever read. 4.5 stars. Could have been a 5 stars. However, the science talk is so heavy in this that there is quite a few sections where I just totally disengaged because I had no idea any of the words they were saying. My favorite romance of the year went to Happy Place by Emily Henry. I absolutely loved the discussion around adult relationships that took place in this book. I also really did enjoy our second chance romance that we see play out. This book 100% found me at the perfect time. It's a book that I'm never going to forget and cannot wait for the day when I do a reread. Havenfall by Sarah Holland. This is a YA fantasy. We follow a teenage girl who has to take the place of her uncle as innkeeper of Havenfall, which is this safe haven between magical realms. Naturally, everything that could go wrong does go wrong, and as she's 17 years old, she handles things very poorly. Quite a few different problems are introduced in this story. We solve 2 out of 3 of them. Gave it a 3 stars, which is maybe a little bit generous, but moving on to book 2 in that series, Phoenix Flame, gave a 1 star. This is another book where I have ranted about this plenty, but overall this book feels like a complete cash grab. There was no reason that it needed to be separated out into 2 books. We continue on with the story within the same summer. It's only like 3 weeks later, finishing out that one remaining problem that was introduced in Havenfall. Our female main character takes a turn for the absolute worst. She became one of my most hated characters that I've ever read about. She was so frustrating and hypocritical, and would not recommend. This next book does give me similar vibes to Powerless, The Heartless Hunter by Kristen Ciccarelli. This follows a witch and a witch hunter who both start pursuing each other to get information out of one another. So fun. I loved getting dual POV within this book because we could see how they were each trying to outsmart each other. I can't wait for book 2 to come out in this series early next year. I think it's going to be such a fun conclusion, and I can't wait to see where the story goes. This next one is Becoming Supernatural by Joe Dispenza. I did DNF this book because it is extremely long and reads like a textbook. I personally felt like it wasn't necessary for me to finish this book because the previous spiritual holistic book that I referenced, Feelings Buried Alive Never Die, basically says the exact same thing as this book. However, that one is way easier to read. This was just an absolute mission to try and get through. And I feel like really is written for skeptics when I'm already a very spiritual person and didn't feel like I needed basic spiritual principles proven to me by science. Better Than the Movies by Lynn Painter. This is a very sweet YA romance where we follow two kids get together in high school. A huge plot line within the story is that our FMC loves 2000s rom-coms. So we get a quote from very famous 2000s movies at the beginning of each chapter, and they kind of loop into what the chapter is going to be about. Did enjoy it, gave it a 3.5 stars. I did find our FMC to be very immature, which is definitely something that comes along within the YA territory. But for a younger audience, I think this is a very cute book. Summer Romance by Annabelle Monaghan. I think this is a very sneaky 5 stars for me. It's not something that always jumps out and the first book I think about whenever I think about my 5 stars, but I absolutely loved reading this. We follow our main character post-divorce and post-losing her mother. So while she's in her mid-30s, she starts trying to rebuild her life, get back on track, and she ends up having a little summer romance. The relationship that takes place in this book is so adorable. I love these two together. I love that they were also a little bit older, so they were very mature. And we didn't have the annoying miscommunication tropes that come up a lot within romance stories. The writing style is very interesting because it is just very short and to the point, but I feel like does still make an impact. Definitely look forward to reading more by Annabelle Monaghan in the future. The Rom-Commers by Katherine Sinner is one that really fell flat for me. We follow an aspiring screenwriter who gets brought in to help with the script of this romance movie. The screenwriter currently working on it never writes romances, but he needs this to get greenlit so that he can work on a different project. I found that the MMC in this was such an asshole to our FMC. I feel like he really never had a redeemable arc within the story, and I didn't find that I could root for their romance. Therefore, I only gave this a 2.5 stars. The Serpent and the Wings of Night within the Crowns of Nyaxia series is a book that I have lowered its rating the more I think about it. For now, it stands at a 4 stars. This is another trials-based system that we follow where our FMC, who doesn't have any powers, gets brought into this world full of vampires, and she needs to survive this cutthroat competition. I just felt like so much that we see within the story has been done before. Just the more I think about this, I think this book was a little bit too long and not unique enough to be a standout. There is a novella that comes afterwards called Six Scorched Roses. We get introduced to 2 totally new characters that are brought into the next book in the series. I did give this a 4 stars. I think this is one of the best novellas I've ever read. We follow characters that are in a different town, and within this town there's a plague that has kind of overtaken the land and overtaken the people within it. Our FMC sister is currently dying from this plague, and she thinks that the vampire within the town might be able to help in hopes of creating a cure. Just an interesting story. I felt like Carissa Broadbent was able to do a lot within this story, even though it was only like 100 pages or so. And I feel like if you want to read the Crowns of Nyaxia series, you do need to read this novella because, again, these characters come into play within book 2, which is called The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King. My rating for book 2 did drop to a 3 stars because this book was so long. And similar to Reckless by Lauren Roberts, it was very much cat and mouse. It felt like we were just going in circles and this plot really couldn't progress forward because there was more tension that took place between our main characters. The banter really wasn't as good. The romance didn't hit as hard. And I don't think I'm going to continue the series from here. For a little sports romance reading blog, I read The Cheat Sheet by Sarah Adams. This is a closed-door football romance where we follow a friends to lovers plotline. I just found this book to be so boring. I didn't feel like either of our main characters had a lot of emotional depth. Wasn't really rooting for their relationship. There was a lot of unbelievable aspects integrated into the story, and just not something I would recommend. 2 stars. This one is a bit of a hot take because I feel like I have a very unpopular opinion regarding this series. I started the Windy City series by Liz Tom Ford, which is a series of sports romances. The first book, Mile High, is a hockey romance between a Playboy NHL player and a flight attendant on his team's private jet. This book gets dogged on by a lot of people because it is very spicy. However, I actually really like this story. I felt like both of our characters did possess a lot of emotional depth. Our male main character went to therapy and I felt like it was very emotionally complex. And our FMC gave plus size representation, which I thought was cool as well. 4 stars, really did enjoy it. My main critique of this book is that it was just a little bit too long in my opinion. Continuing on into book 2, which I've heard is some of people's favorites because the MMC within this book is so beloved, and book 2 is The Right Move. I 100% agree that our MMC within this book is such a dreamboat. Absolutely loved him. However, I really couldn't connect to our female main character, Indy. I felt like he was too good for her. She was pretty immature, didn't really love what she had to offer to the story. Gave it a 3.5 stars, and I do plan on continuing this series in 2025. This book was a super fun one for me. The Blonde Identity by Ally Carter. I have a lot of history with this author. I read all of her books whenever I was a child growing up. I just felt like this one was so fun, and it's a play on the Bourne Identity movie, where our main character wakes up with amnesia. However, people are trying to kill them. So they need to figure out how to survive and get out of this situation. But we also get a little romance develop along the way as well. Whenever this book ended, I questioned if this was going to be part of a series because it did kind of leave some things open-ended. And we did get confirmation that book 2 in the series is coming out in the fall time of next year. And I'm really looking forward to that one. People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry gave this one a 4.5 stars. Not my favorite Emily Henry read, but not a bad book by any means. I do really enjoy this one. We follow 2 long-term friends, watch them evolve into lovers, and their friendship kind of centers around going on these different trips together. So we watch them in present day go on a trip to Palm Springs, but we also get glimpses into their previous like 12 years of history and seeing how their friendship evolved and broke down at one point and what they're going to do to rebuild it. Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. Again, I think I have a little bit of an unpopular opinion on this one because I feel like everyone gives this a 5 stars. I did enjoy this book, however, it wasn't a standout for me. This is another one with some magical realism aspects because there's a magical typewriter that comes into play. When our FMC is writing letters to who she thinks is going to be her brother, they actually get sent to our love interest and they develop a relationship from there. There's also a backstory with gods and this war that's going on. That part really didn't do it for me. I did feel like their relationship was cute, but I just don't feel like it was that much of a standout. And all of the politics that were happening in this book, I literally couldn't care less about. Gave it a 3.5 stars. However, I've heard such terrible things about what happens next in this duology that I don't think that I'm gonna continue it from here. The Naturals by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. This has got to be one of the funniest reading experiences I've ever vlogged. I read this in a 24-hour readathon and I just absolutely did not like this at all. I just don't think that like mystery thrillers are for me. There's a whole side plot with a serial killer where we get inside the heads of serial killers within this, and it just made me feel so icky and so gross. I gave it a 2.5 stars because I literally don't think I can really rate these things because this is just so not my genre. I've already bought the box set of this, so like potentially I'll read book 2 next year. If I don't like that one, I'm just gonna have to donate these books because they just really simply aren't for me. A fun book I read to kick off spooky season was The Ex-Hex by Erin Sterling. This was just honestly a silly, goofy time where we follow a girl who hexed her ex, and whenever he comes back into town, things just start going wrong for him. She realizes that this is mostly due to her fault, so she does team up to help him. I did think this was cute, but it's not something that I'm gonna write home about. 3.5 stars. Do know there are other books within the series. If you have read this and love it, you can continue on from there. Potentially I will pick up book 2 during next fall time, but not something that I'm rushing to read. Another book that has only decreased in rating over time, Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. Talk about an overhyped book. The rating this has on Goodreads, how TikTok, BookTok, BookTube talks about this book. I had such high expectations going into this. I could not connect to our FMC at all. I found her to be such a frustrating character. The best part of this book by far is the MMC, because he possesses a lot of the shadow daddy, bat boy aspects that we see within Sarah J Maas books. I just unfortunately feel like Sarah J Maas does it better. The ending is really good, which is why originally I rated this higher. But within like a 600-page book, if the best part of it is the 100 pages at the end, you're gonna need to do better. Because for such a large portion of this, I felt like I was just struggling through it. Another wholesome, sweet witchy read is The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. It's quite the title, I know, but I do think it's worth a read. 4.25 stars. We watch a witch be brought into this home where there are 3 young witches to kind of be their tutor and help them control their magic. So wholesome, so sweet. I felt like all of the minor characters within the story were such a standout, and the found family that happens within the story is amazing. We can get a couple out of the way pretty quickly. I read the Twilight series. I did vlog this whole thing, so if you want like super in-depth thoughts, you can always watch that video. Twilight gave 4 stars purely for the nostalgic vibes. New Moon, I found Bella and Jacob to be so insufferable that it was literally putting me in a depression. 2 stars. Eclipse, I just like really don't think this book needs to exist. I think we could have cut this out of the series entirely. 3 stars. Breaking Dawn, I feel like this is actually the best written book out of all of them. So much goes down in this book and a huge character change takes place. I think this is actually the best book within the series. However, all I'm gonna give it is a 4 stars. My Roommate is a Vampire. I really did enjoy the first half of this book because I felt like it was playing into how ridiculous the storyline was. However, once the romance starts to kick off in the second half of the story, I feel like the author just started taking themselves way too seriously, and it did decrease my enjoyment on this to a 3 stars. I feel like if we just kept this a silly, goofy time, this book would have been a lot better. Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This was truly quite the heartbreaking read. Had to take multiple breaks when listening to this one because there are some difficult topics tackled around grief, alcoholism, cheating. It's written in a similar style to Ellen Hildebrandt, where we get the third person POV and we just follow so many characters. As I listened to this as an audiobook, that was overwhelming at first, but you do settle into it. This book really makes me want to read Carrie Soto Is Back, so I probably will pick up another Taylor Jenkins Reid book in 2025. Love Theoretically by Ali Hazelwood. I told you guys previously my love-hate relationship that goes on with Ali Hazelwood. I did find our female main character to be less annoying in this book. However, couldn't connect to the male main character in this one. I felt like their spicy scenes were really weird, wasn't enjoying them, and couldn't really root for them. So I only gave this a 3 stars. Funny Story by Emily Henry. Unfortunately, I do think this is my least favorite Emily Henry book. However, I still did give this a 3.75. The plot within the story is so convoluted, but our main characters are both dumped by their respective partners, and those partners end up together. So we kind of just do like a flip-flop of who everyone is dating, as our main characters have to move in together because our FMC gets kicked out of her home and has no place to live, and our MMC needs someone to help pay rent. These two also then end up fake dating to make their exes jealous, and it's just a whole lot going on. One thing I found is that I couldn't fully connect to these characters because I couldn't really see myself in either of them, but that is a bit ironic because I felt like we actually got too much time with these characters, and the story overall dragged a little bit for me. Angel Falls by Kristen Hanna. Had so much hope going into this one. I was looking for an emotionally based read, which I thought Kristen Hanna would be able to deliver based on how people speak about her other popular books. However, I actually learned that this book, I think, was her first published book ever. Felt very dated. We follow a family after the mom and wife of this family gets into an accident and is in a long-term coma. I really couldn't understand what Kristen Hanna was trying to prove was the point of bringing her back. Was it going to be the love of her family? Was it the love of her mystery ex-husband? Or is it prayer that's going to bring us back? I didn't feel like the answer was ever clear. I didn't really love the conclusion, and I really hated the dad within the story because he called his son, who witnessed the accident, pathetic multiple times for how he was coping, and I just really couldn't resonate with that character at all. I'm wondering if I should award this the worst book of the year for me. I finally read The Zodiac Academy, which I had been avoiding for many moons. I had had it on quite a few TBRs and just never got around to reading it. I know this has a cult following. I've heard that the later books are better. Personally, I just couldn't get through this one. I found the writing to be so immature, and the bully romance that is depicted, which is actually just physical abuse, I couldn't get behind whatsoever. On a very different note, let's talk about one of the most amazing series that I've read this year. I started the Throne of Glass series by Sarah J Maas. I personally did make the decision to start off with The Assassin's Blade, which is a collection of short stories. This is the prequel novel, so I am reading the series in chronological order. There are a couple different places that you can read this story, however, chronologically is what made the most sense to me. Did give this a 4 stars. I did love getting introduced to our FMC. However, because it was formatted as short stories, I didn't feel like we could connect to her emotionally as much because of it. Next, we have Throne of Glass, which I did give a 5 stars. Loved every second of this. While this also does have a trial or Hunger Games aspect to it, I just loved how strong our FMC was. Her character development already throughout this series is phenomenal to me. I think one of the best quotes of the entire year comes from this book, where she says, "My name is Selena Sardothien, but it makes no difference if my name's Selena or Lillian or Bitch, because I'd still beat you no matter what you call me." And I'm like, yes, queen. Love her. Taking that energy into Crown of Midnight, another 5 stars. She's just continuing to get stronger and more powerful, and I can't wait to see where the series goes from here. Now we're entering into all the books that I read in December. I'm not actually going to do a December wrap up because I am doing this video instead. However, the first few books that I read in December are all within a holiday book reading vlog. So if you want to see in-depth thoughts on quite a few of these, go ahead and check out that video. I started off by reading Holiday Romance by Catherine Walsh. This is another friends to lovers story. Our main characters currently live in Chicago, however they both are from Dublin, Ireland. So every year during the holiday season, they end up on the same flight home for Christmas. And at first, they are not close, they are not friends, but over the course of 10 or 12 years, they develop quite the friendship. This year is the absolute cursed year of getting home. They have to take planes, trains, and automobiles to get home. It takes 4 days longer than it should have, but it does bring them closer, and the story is just so cute and fun to witness. Next, we have The Book Club Hotel by Sarah Morgan. This is more of a literary fiction take on a holiday read. We follow 3 women who travel to this wintry inn for their book club. However, we learn that one of our characters might be connected to the innkeeper a little bit more than they originally let on. And we watch these 4 women work together, become closer, and just see the power of girlhood played out throughout their stories. It is sweet, it is wholesome, but it's not something that I'm really ever going to think about again. Just gave it a very standard 3 stars. Another super fun book by Ally Carter, The Most Wonderful Crime of the Year. This is a Knives Out meets holiday romance. We watch these 2 rivaling mystery authors get taken to this secret location during Christmas time. After a day of being there, their host goes missing, and it becomes a whodunit situation where they have to team up to solve this crime. I just felt like this was so fun. The banter, the wittiness within this book was so enjoyable to read, and it was so fast-paced and easy to get through. Another book by Ashley Poston on the list, I read The Dead Romantics. The magical realism aspect that we see within this story is that our female main character can see and speak to ghosts. And she ends up developing a relationship with a ghost whenever she's back home, helping her family through the loss of someone very special to her. Obviously, as she has a relationship with a ghost, this book is a little kooky, but I did enjoy my time. It's not my favorite by Ashley Poston. I gave it a 3.75. This was her first introduction to adult romances, so I still think she was figuring out a few things. However, she is an auto-buy author for me, so I look forward to her next book that she was releasing in 2025. Talk about something so nostalgic. I read the first book in the Harry Potter series. I think this book is perfect to read around Christmas time. Seeing the introduction to Hogwarts and our characters was so special, and I loved every second. Gave it a 5 stars because honestly, I didn't know how else to rate this. I wouldn't have changed a thing about the story. For another little billionaire romance, I read The Spare by Ava Ronnie. I've never heard anyone talk about this book or this author, so I didn't really know what to expect going into this, but we get a dual POV of childhood friends to lovers, but it's also a brother's best friend trope, which is originally why I bought this book, because I don't think I've ever read a brother's best friend. I loved how it was done because of the billionaire status. There was a lot of fun trips, a lot of fun surprises that made this book super fun and enjoyable to read through. It's not something that changed my life, but I probably will read the next book in the series. For our final Christmassy book of the year, I read Cruel Winter with You by Ali Hazelwood. Through Kindle Unlimited or Amazon, there was a series of 5 Christmassy novellas released by different romance authors. Thought I would give Ali Hazelwood's a go, and I actually really did like this book, even though it was so short. We follow our 2 main characters over the course of one night whenever she is sent over to his house to pick up a pan. However, it's a complete blizzard outside and she gets snowed in after walking over there. Naturally, being snowed in together, they start playing a drinking game where we learn more about their friendship / relationship through a series of flashbacks. I actually think these characters were some of my favorite Ali Hazelwood characters I've read thus far. However, because the story is so short, I could only give it a 3 stars. This is something that I wish was longer because I would have liked seeing these 2 develop their relationship further. And now it is time to talk about our final book of 2024. I can't even tell you how dry my throat is, so I'm going to need to have another tea once we're done here. But the final book of the year was Belladonna by Adele Grace. I really don't feel like I've read anything like this because this is a gothic romance where our female main character develops a relationship with death. Already, she has a very complex relationship with death because she was orphaned as a baby, and basically every guardian she lives with over the course of her life dies. Everywhere she goes, death seems to follow, and she refuses to let death take another person within her life. As she gets to her new home though, she realizes that there's a mystery yet to be solved. I gave this a 4 stars because I wholeheartedly did not see the ending coming. I thought I had the murderer pegged really early on in the story. I couldn't have been more wrong. This book takes quite the series of twists and turns, and I will definitely be reading book 2 in 2025. So that is it, y'all. That is the end of all of the books I read within 2024. If you made it to the end, absolute gold star for you. I have no idea how long this video is going to be, but I have a feeling it will be pretty long. As we enter 2025, please let me know down below if there's any videos you'd like to see, and make sure that you like and subscribe so that you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. For now, I will love you and leave you while I still have a voice. But again, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye, guys.